High above the glistening glass floors of the Galactic Space Council species, the chamber roar of arrogance. Murmuring in a dozen other tongues, some vibrating, others throughout the known cosmos. More clicking and thought transmission caused the delegation's weaker members to twitch and remain silent. This regulation, one of several created after humanity scarcely listened, crawled out of its third planetary war, its home still blazing beneath the wounds of resource depletion and climatic disaster. Admiral Kane of the Rift stood at the rear of the chamber with his arms folded behind his back. His jaw was clenched, and his eyes were two weary coal shards that didn't wander. Impressed by the Thrick Coalition's floating aristocrats or Venturi Prime's gelatinous mind-binders. Quantity of smug thinking clouds hovering over their heads in nutrient pods. Kane had witnessed more at the war camps of Jupiter's moons, where he had perished next to. As they held him, dying soldiers in Titan's rust storms tore flaming flesh from his arms. These animals, these council members, and the line in the Europa siege. Their sterile diplomacy and properly disinfected morals were unaware of war. Humanity's suggestion for autonomous fleet deployment, similar to what Earth did, is. The Hellerith speaker denied once more, his eyes gleaming like twins of scorn. With the weight of a decision already bearing down on him, Emerald Sun's voice echoed throughout the chamber. Written, you are a world in recovery, not a client species. Kane didn't flinch when he heard the words, but they were a surprise. It's time for Kane to tap. A whisper came to life beneath the collar of his black suit. As soon as his wrist was above the chamber, the stars themselves started to flicker, then 10 more like the. As the cosmos itself held its breath, the council room suddenly became buzzing. The Thricks squawked in bewilderment as the Venturi pods moved. The Kalaris fungi whirled around, glowed ferociously in fear, and then the enormous center view screen of the chamber rippled open to reveal the entire cosmic spectacle. Then quiet descended. 5 enormous things, each darker than the others, were present. Without any heat signature, energy spike, or propulsion, the area surrounding them lingered beyond the Council planet's orbital ring. Purely designed black human warships with zero emissions are not hypothetical. They're not concept art that was taken by Council spies, they're actually working there in the dark. 10 years ago, humanity couldn't have created matter vessels by Council criteria. Has the capacity to utilize reliable fusion on a mobile platform as well as. They had just parked 5 worlds in front of all the great powers in the galaxy. Kane walked forward as the murderers on the Council's doorway appeared to be a terrible invitation. Slowly and methodically until he found himself in the circle where speeches were typically given by obedient, desperate. I came here to ask the reps, and he said in a quiet voice and. Hey, I'm here to inform you that the speaker from Hellerith opened his mouth, but Kane held up a hand to signal that there would be no more leashes around Earth's neck. You treated us like parasites when we requested for a cooperation. Unity, and you imposed hierarchy, stealing our technology and stealing our data. Mocked our blood as you surrounded us with warships. He moved closer to his. The sound of boots reverberating on the ancient floors of peace and diplomacy, both long dead. Kane nodded to the empty spaces outside the screen as he explained these spacecraft to him. Our answers rather than threats. You asked what people could do if they were left alone, and here is what we. Does the ambassador from Thrice scream anything in its native tongue and translate it? Arrived a moment later, is this a war declaration? Kane grinned for the. This is the first funeral notice for the old order in a couple of weeks. When he felt a tap on his wrist, one of the battleships only had 1 weapon powered, there was no light, no charge-up sequence, and no energy trembling, just a council moon. A adjacent one that was utilized for training simulations vanished like a candle. Crushed beneath an invisible thumb, with no wreckage or explosion, just emptiness. The delegates screeched and telepathically screamed as the chamber burst into anarchy. When they initially told, years ago, scrambling Kane made his move, but he didn't move. They were now the ones observing Earth as they waited while they took advantage of its destruction. Earth was trembling, and at last, Earth was speaking loudly. Even when security closed the room and filled the exits with confinement, the screaming hadn't actually stopped. Fields, the terror had not subsided. Instead, it simply became silent, the kind of calm that made men tighten their jaws and perspire, the sort of silence that causes generals to gaze at the. Admiral Kane stood there, re-evaluating their decades of presumed superiority. His pulse hardly moved, like a monolith still in the middle of the storm. For him, this was justice that had been postponed, twisted, and earned. It wasn't power. Blood. He recalled Mars, and he recalled the Phobos courtroom where a Kalari. When he saw the picture of Earth's hungry colonies, the ambassador spat and blamed humanity. The same ambassador now sat glumly in the face of evolutionary failure. Like algae waiting for the sun, he glows dim green in his containment shell. Kane remembered the trade embargo that allowed him to return without looking at him. When the third exo-economy collapsed on Earth, the Hellerith laughed. As kids in New Nairobi died snatching at one another for attention, laughter could be heard on the satellite feeds. The same Hellerith now gazed at the remnants of algal paste. He turned his head slowly and spoke, his eyes staring at the empty space where a moon formerly stood. Into the back of his ear implant. The main dark matter warship, the Bastion, responded in a deep, serene voice. Fleet trapped all 5 ships, now parked in space like a loaded cannon on a negotiating table. Active cloak integrity at 100 charged targets with primary weapons that are mapped and waiting. Kane nodded slightly in affirmation, but we won't talk again. He turned and left the council floor without anyone, not even the chamber, daring to stop him unless they begged. Wears gold robes and carries pulse staves to protect such ceremonial objects. Merely turned away, having witnessed what true silence, rather than peace, meant. However, he took the transit shuttle in the suffocating, hollow aftermath of the eraser. 2 hours later, the bridge returned to the orbital dock by itself on board the USS Bastion. Was cold. Not because of a problem, but because dark matter warships were not intended to operate. Neither extravagance nor morale were allowed under the Council's established norms. They were tooth-equipped steel coffins constructed at far-orbiting dry docks. From any known paths in unmapped systems run by guys who offered their services. To live in perpetual shadow and vanish from Earth's history, Captain Briggs was at the helm. With his visage as rough as the mountain ranges, he held console hands behind his back. Ex-Marine turned, leaving behind a scarred cheek and nose that had been fractured multiple times. The naval commander is a devoted jerk and one of the few people who truly. The planetary lock Briggs stated that the Council world defenses are. You want to start rattling the sword? No, Kane said, stepping, as their networks attempted to scan us 3 times but were unsuccessful. Briggs grinned as he let them choke.